Glad to have you back with us. This is Dispo Paul. Look, we make our daily bread wholesaling houses. That isn't going away. Keep mailing, keep calling, keep texting, keep locking up those deals. But I need you to open your eyes up to a second type of deal. A deal that might land, no pun intended, on your desk today and look like junk if you don't know what you're seeing. I'm talking about vacant land, specifically vacant land near power. My research team just did a deep dive on why the biggest institutions in the world are fighting over dirt next to substations and commercial industrial grade power lines. If you come across a lot like this, do not analyze it like a residential lot. You'll leave six figures on the table. I used Notebook LLM to help me create this breakdown. What you're listening to is a simulated AI podcast based on the data and our experience that we gave to them. Learn to spot the difference between a traditional vacant residential lot and a lot next to a power grid. And when you see one of these power deals, you'll know exactly why it's worth a fortune. Let's dive right in.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's a full-scale institutional realignment.
It is a structural pivot.
If you asked any traditional real estate guy, 2 years ago, where the smart money was flowing, what would they have said?
Oh, industrial, logistics, maybe multifamily if they were feeling adventurous.
Or they'd still be clinging to office towers, right?
Still trying to make office work.
Yeah.
And they'd be wrong.
Dead wrong. Because the core figure, the one that redefines what a prime asset class even means for the foreseeable future, is this. Data centers accounted for an astounding 31% of total private real estate funding raised globally. That's between Q1 and Q3 of 2025. 31%.
Just think about that percentage in context. I mean, since 2020, even with the whole pandemic acceleration, that average institutional number was hovering around, what, 15%?
15, yeah.
So in the space of 9 months, the institutional appetite for digital infrastructure, which, let's be honest, is fundamentally power infrastructure, it more than doubled its share of global private real estate capital. This isn't just market noise. This is the sound of a seismic permanent wealth transfer.
It's a cannibalization of the traditional sectors. It has to be. Data center investment is actively and aggressively displacing those old pillars.
Industrial, logistics, and most noticeably, the entire office sector. It's just getting hollowed out.
We are watching Exactly. According to the research, that Q1 to Q3 2025 period saw total funding allocated specifically to these private real estate vehicles sit at $17.9 billion.
$17.9 billion in 9 months.
This isn't pocket change. This is a massive concentrated slice of global institutional capital just flooding into what most people still mistakenly think is a niche market.
And critically, this capital isn't coming from, small, high-risk venture firms. This is the definition of smart, patient money. Just look at the institutional commitment. 2 of the top 10 funds that closed in the entire world in 2025 were pure data center vehicles.
Okay, laid them out.
We are talking about the $7 billion Blue Owl Digital Infrastructure Fund 3.
$7 billion.
With a B. And the $3.64 billion Principal Data Center Growth and Income Fund.
When you see funds of that colossal multi-billion-dollar size close, it's just not a trend anymore. It signals a structural mandate.
It's the world's largest pools of money making a foundational bet. They are not chasing the last cycle. They're betting their entire strategy on the permanent, accelerating need for digital infrastructure.
They're redefining the core components of real estate. It's not bricks and mortar anymore.
No, it's energy and connectivity.
And what's driving this? I mean, we know it's AI, but let's be specific.
Well, the proliferation of high-density AI workloads. That's the key. A standard data center, the kind designed for, your cloud storage and web traffic.
The old stuff.
The old stuff. It only requires maybe 5 to 10 kilowatts per rack. But these new AI compute centers, they need 15 to 100 kilowatts per rack.
10 times the power density.
At least. It's an exponential difference in power consumption.
Yeah.
And that is what is breaking the existing power grids. It's a quantum leap in energy demand.
That distinction is so crucial. The old 15% allocation was fine for storing your vacation photos and running email servers. This new 31% allocation is what's necessary to train these frontier AI models. You can't just plug a massive AI farm into the average suburban grid. It's not elastic demand. It's absolute.
It is, and as you said, Colliers confirmed this sharp rise. The U.S. is still the largest market, of course, but this is a global mandate. Capital is moving wherever it can find capacity.
We've seen that rapid EMEA growth, right? Germany, the Netherlands, the UK. The sources cite established connectivity and stable regulatory frameworks as the draw.
But that strategic draw is quickly, and I mean very quickly, turning into a bottleneck.
And that's the critical constraint we have to understand. Despite this record investment, $17.9 billion deployed in 9 months, Colliers points out there are significant challenges that are actively slowing down the ability of this capital to even be deployed.
And these constraints are the map to our opportunity.
Exactly.
Because they dictate precisely where the next wave of capital is forced to flow. It's the scarcity trifecta: power availability, land constraints, and regulatory complexity.
Those 3 constraints are the entire investment thesis now, aren't they? It confirms that institutional investors are completely focused on infrastructure-linked assets, the availability of energy, the certainty of the power supply, the grid capacity.
It's the single most critical factor in site selection now. It's displaced every traditional metric.
Proximity to an airport, who cares? Proximity to a downtown core, irrelevant.
Is it next to a substation that can deliver 200 megawatts? That's the only question that matters. Power is the premium commodity, not land density.
And the grid hurdle is the immediate paralyzing bottleneck in the big European markets. Let's talk about the FLAPD markets: Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam.
Paris, Dublin. Demand for data center space there is historically strong. But new developments are suffering badly from those exact power constraints and planning hurdles.
What are those hurdles specifically? When we say planning hurdles, we're talking about utility companies being completely overwhelmed, right? They just can't keep up.
Precisely. In a market like London, for example, the utility providers have multi-year queues. Years. Just to get an agreement for a new high-voltage connection. It's a systemic failure of the infrastructure to keep pace with exponential demand. And on top of that, you have localized opposition NIMBYism against any kind of industrial-scale development.
Not in my backyard.
Exactly. Plus, complex regulatory approval processes that can stretch the time to market from, say, 18 months to 3 or even 4 years.
And time is money for these funds. Delay just kills the returns.
It completely destroys the model.
So if the institutional money, the funds that just raised $7 billion, if they're physically locked out of the best primary locations because the grid is maxed out and permitting is a nightmare, they have 2 options. They can wait and lose all momentum, or
they find secondary locations, places that are overlooked but possess that legacy grid capacity.
they have to spend that money somewhere. The mandate from their investors is urgent.
And we see the evidence right there in the source material. Increasing portfolio activity in Southern and Eastern Europe. They're citing specific deals in Slovakia and Poland. And that isn't because Bratislava is suddenly the next major tech hub.
No. The motivation is pure infrastructure capacity arbitrage. That's all it is.
Exactly. The fact that these massive global firms are looking so far beyond the established FLAPD hubs just to find grid capacity, it validates our entire tactical thesis. Power is the premium commodity, and they will follow it anywhere. The scarcity of available high-capacity power in prime markets is forcing the money into places that have that legacy power infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that is the massive, time-sensitive opportunity we need to capitalize on before that capital floods all the available dirt and raises the price floor forever.
Okay, let's pivot now and talk about the people who are missing this. This is the frustrating part, right? Watching people cling to the traditional real estate hustle that is it's completely obsolete in the face of this capital shift.
It's the definition of the red ocean problem. The waters are choppy, they're bloody, and it's full of excessive competition, all fighting for marginal returns. The game has fundamentally changed, but most of the players haven't realized the scoreboard is tracking a totally different sport.
You see it every day. The traditional wholesaler fighting over the same rundown 3-bed, 2-bath ranch house with 15 other guys. They are scraping and clawing for a measly one-off $5,000 assignment fee.
A fee on a property that requires complex negotiations, $50,000 in due diligence and repair estimates. It's insane.
And their blind spot is it's a canyon. They're cold calling the same tired list of residential homeowners that 500 other people called that morning.
And they are utterly ignoring the fact that 31% of the entire global real estate market has shifted its focus to infrastructure plays, not residential flips. They are chasing the symptoms of the last cycle while the source of global wealth has moved on entirely.
That is the new hard truth for anyone in the acquisition game. Chase the source, not the symptom. The source document says it perfectly. The money isn't in the servers. For the strategic investor, the maximum leverage is in the land, the dirt.
And we have to acknowledge, our listeners' limitations here. You cannot realistically go out and build a data center.
Yeah.
That requires upwards of $500 million in initial capital.
At least. Plus, multi-year utility agreements and operational expertise. It's a massive undertaking.
But what those multi-billion-dollar funds, Blackstone, KKR, DigitalBridge, what they absolutely must have right now and cannot easily get is this strategically located, clean, and buildable dirt. They need the physical ground to plant those data centers, and they needed it yesterday.
And that's the gap we exploit with the Drive for Power strategy. This is the blue ocean solution because it attacks the core non-negotiable requirement for data centers.
Power.
It's all about power.
They cannot build just anywhere. This is the simple foundational constraint that changes everything. A data center has to be right next to high-voltage transmission lines and substations. It's the only way to efficiently draw the massive amounts of power they require, especially for these modern high-density AI workloads.
If they have to run high-voltage cable even a mile, it's over.
It introduces immense costs, time delays, and legal risk that just eradicates their profit margins.
Let's break down why that transmission run costs millions. It's not just the cost of the copper wire.
Oh, not at all. It's the legal and regulatory complexity. Running new high-voltage cable requires securing a legal easement, a written right-of-way. That often means expensive, complex negotiations with dozens of intermediate property owners, and some of them might just refuse outright.
And then you're stuck?
You're stuck. Or you're facing months, even years of public hearings and regulatory approvals before you can even think about laying the first piece of wire. The developer pays a huge premium for proximity because they are buying out all of that time and all of that legal risk in one go.
So the entire play is simplified. We stop driving for dollars, looking for tall grass and overflowing mailboxes. We drive for power.
It's an easily executed visual strategy. You open up Google Earth, where you just get in your car and drive the perimeter of your target secondary market. You are hunting for the massive lattice structures, the steel towers, the industrial Eiffel towers that carry those high-voltage transmission lines.
And you ignore the skinny wooden poles.
Ignore the wooden poles.
Yeah.
Those bring power to your house. We're looking for the big stuff. Follow those steel towers until you hit a large, fenced-in substation. You can often hear that distinct, powerful hum of the transformers when you get close.
And the target acquisition is right next door.
Right next door. We're looking for vacant lots, maybe a rundown farm, an old junkyard, or a dilapidated commercial site. That owner has no idea what they're sitting on. They think their land is worth standard residential or maybe agricultural prices. But to a data center developer, that land is gold because it provides immediate, low-cost access to the grid.
It's the definition of plug-and-play power connectivity.
The leverage here is just. It's profound. If you ignore this and stay in that red ocean, you are fighting for scraps. You're fighting for pennies. If you execute this strategic land acquisition, you tap directly into the highest concentration of institutional capital flowing in global real estate today.
And the payoff speaks for itself. We're not talking about $5,000 assignment fees. Assignment fees on commercial land spreads, especially land that meets these specific infrastructure criteria, are often 10, even 20 times residential spreads.
Easily. Because you're not selling a house. You are selling a vital piece of supply chain infrastructure that enables a multi-billion-dollar project. The criteria are simple, the competition is low, and the reward is high. Location plus power.
Okay, so we've established that proximity to power is the metric that matters. To prove this isn't just a theory, we have to look at the market that basically defined this whole sector, Northern Virginia.
Loudoun County. Specifically, the Ashburn Corridor. It's Data Center Alley, the undisputed king of global compute capacity. But its current status is the perfect, clear warning sign for us. It's the ultimate validation of the power problem.
Give us the scale of the saturation there. How bad is it?
In the first half of 2025 alone, that single area absorbed 50% of all data center demand in North America.
Half in one county.
It has defined the market for 2 decades. It is the most connected place on Earth.
But the problem, as our sources clearly state, is that it is officially full. The utility companies have come out and said it. They have no more immediate capacity, the grid is strained, and the price of raw, undeveloped, non-contaminated dirt is astronomical.
We're seeing prices north of $3 million per acre.
$3 million an acre. And that's before you do any massive site work. The cost of entry has become prohibitive, and the core infrastructure is stretched way past the breaking point.
And this creates the crucial arbitrage opportunity for us. Because the king market is saturated, the money that mandated $17.9 billion in institutional capital that has to be deployed is spilling over. It's being forced into secondary markets where land is cheaper, but crucially, legacy power capacity is readily available.
The constraints in the established market are creating massive immediate opportunities everywhere else.
Exactly.
So where is the spillage happening? Where should you be directing your drive for power right now? The source material gives us a pretty clear list of the next hotspots.
We can start with the established next-tier markets, places that offer scale and redundancy. You've got Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, which is now solidly the #2 U.S. market. It offers low operational costs. Then you look at Atlanta, Georgia. It's seeing massive growth, primarily due to cheaper, reliable power and a less stringent regulatory environment than you'd find on the coasts.
And Phoenix.
And Phoenix, Arizona, which serves as that crucial low-risk backup hub for the entire West Coast. It's got great fiber connectivity. These are known growth markets, but they are still way cheaper than Northern Virginia.
But here's the hidden gem. This is the one that perfectly validates the drive for power thesis all by itself. We're seeing Columbus, Ohio, and Pennsylvania emerging rapidly as massive targets. Now, why those two? They aren't typically considered tech hubs.
Because they possess the legacy baseload power infrastructure that these intensive AI workloads desperately need. These are states with a deep history of coal and nuclear power generation. The grids there were designed for heavy industrial draw.
So the capacity is already baked in.
It's already baked in, even if the surrounding real estate market is depressed compared to the coasts. They have the existing grid and the rights of way that the major coastal hubs just don't have anymore. It's about reliable, massive amounts of electrons flowing constantly, 24/7.
Which brings us to the definitive proof point. The move that validates our entire strategy in cold, hard cash. Blackstone's power move. They are the largest alternative asset manager in the world. They're the definition of smart, first-mover institutional money.
And Blackstone isn't just participating in the sector. They are trying to own the entire vertical stack, from the dirt all the way up to the power generation itself. We saw their massive institutional win when they acquired AirTrunk for $16 billion.
The largest data center deal in history.
And they also strategically own QTS Realty Trust, which is a massive operator.
But their strategic announcement in 2025, that's the headline that should be a flashing light for anyone looking for strategic direction. Blackstone announced a staggering $25 billion investment in Pennsylvania, specifically to build data centers and to invest in the supporting power infrastructure to run them.
That is the moment of clarity right there. You connect the dots instantly. They chose Pennsylvania, a state with deep legacy power infrastructure. They didn't choose it for its proximity to Wall Street or for the weather. They chose it because of its reliable power legacy and the ability to scale energy quickly.
They are following the existing grid capacity. They're leveraging legacy infrastructure, not trying to fight the saturation in New York or Virginia.
The drive for power strategy is 100% validated and funded by the biggest real estate investor on the planet. If they're willing to spend $25 billion to plant flags based on grid capacity and leverage, we should be willing to spend our time locating the raw dirt near substations in those exact areas.
And this leads us to the disposition side. Who are you ultimately selling that dirt to? Because this isn't a long, complicated retail sale process. When you lock up land near a substation that passes the criteria, you are feeding the direct pipeline for a very specific, incredibly solvent group of end buyers.
Let's define those buyers because they represent the certainty of payment and the speed of transaction that we need. Go for it. We can categorize them into two groups: the capital infrastructure giants, the trillion-dollar club, and the hyperscalers. The infrastructure giants include Blackstone, of course, through QTS, Digital Bridge, KKR with their $50 billion joint venture specifically for AI data centers, and Brookfield Infrastructure. Their entire business model is based on deploying massive capital efficiently, and they are constantly hungry for buildable land.
Then you have the hyperscalers, the tech giants who are building their own infrastructure because the sheer scale and the proprietary nature of their compute needs is too vast to rely only on third parties.
You're talking Amazon, AWS spending over $100 billion on infrastructure.
$100 billion.
Microsoft investing $80 billion on AI centers, Google spending $75 billion, and Meta spending $65 billion.
And the key reason the hyperscalers are spending this money internally is speed and control, right? And proprietary chip integration.
Exactly. They cannot wait for a third party to manage their construction queue. They need sites that are shovel-ready, and they have internal mandates tied to quarterly capital expenditures that require constant deployment. When you control the right piece of land, you are in a negotiation with one of the most creditworthy, time-sensitive entities on Earth, and that is the ultimate leverage.
Okay, now we get intensely tactical. We've established the money is there, the constraint is power, and the opportunity is acquiring the dirt near the grid. But this is the critical distinction. It's not just any dirt. This is the standard operating procedure. The four-point checklist that separates the professional institutional investor from the amateur who thinks an aerial photo is enough. We have to cut the fluff and deliver this non-negotiable inspection before we even think about submitting a contract.
This checklist is our primary risk mitigation tool. That's what it is. It ensures we are only spending acquisition effort on parcels that meet the exact, non-negotiable requirements of a multi-billion-dollar data center developer. We can eliminate 95% of the noise and the risk of a broken contract immediately.
Let's start with point 1, the most critical item on the entire list, the high voltage test, the eye test. This determines if the asset is even in the right asset class to begin with.
The rule is absolute. If you can't throw a rock and hit a transmission line or a substation, you move on without a second thought. We are ruthless about this proximity because proximity equals eliminated regulatory risk and millions in saved connection costs.
When you're doing the initial digital recon on Google Earth, what defines high voltage? How do you differentiate the valuable infrastructure from the suburban power lines?
Look for the size and the material. We are hunting for the massive steel lattice towers, often gray or silver, and the large, multi-acre fenced-in substations that hum with the conversion of power. You ignore the wooden poles, proximity is everything. Ideal is adjacent, the land is literally touching the substation perimeter fence. Acceptable is within half a mile, so 0.5 miles. Anything beyond that half-mile radius introduces escalating complexity and costs that cut directly into the developer's premium.
Let's just reiterate that cost element because it really explains the premium. Why is avoiding a 1-mile transmission line run worth potentially 7 figures to a developer?
It's the time risk. Like we said, securing the legal right-of-way, the easements, from dozens of surrounding private property owners is a protracted, highly litigious process. It can add 12 to 24 months to a project timeline. A developer pays a massive premium for the dirt that eliminates that delay entirely. They want to avoid expensive condemnation proceedings and the regulatory nightmare of running new lines. This is the high-voltage test that the land must pass to be considered data center gold. If the land fails this test, the rest of the checklist is utterly irrelevant.
Okay, so assuming it passes the high-voltage test, we move to point 2, the wetland trap, the deal killer. This is where amateurs often make fatal 6-figure mistakes they don't even realize they've made until due diligence kicks in.
The rule is simple, and it's unforgiving. If it's underwater, your deal is underwater. Data centers require massive, heavy, vibration-sensitive buildings, often over 1 million square feet. Developers need to pour massive concrete slabs quickly. Wetlands mean permitting nightmares, expensive mitigation efforts like importing tons of fill dirt, or, more often than not, regulatory impossibility due to environmental protection laws.
So how do you execute this check efficiently without hiring an environmental engineer on day 1?
You use the free, publicly accessible tool, the National Wetlands Inventory Mapper, the NWI Mapper. It's online, maintained by the government, and it provides a preliminary screen. You type in the address or the coordinates. A pass is a map that is clear or white. A fail is any map that is covered in green, blue, or red shading, which indicates protected wetlands or bodies of water.
And this is the critical blind spot for land investors. You drive by the property in dry July, it looks like perfect buildable ground, you get it under contract, only to realize later that 80% of your 20 acres are federally protected wetlands that can never, ever be developed.
Your contract is worse than worthless at that point. It's a reputation killer. You've locked up unusable ground. Institutional buyers perform this check instantly. If it fails, they walk immediately because they have zero appetite for wetland mitigation or protracted regulatory battles. We have to screen this before we ever engage the seller with a contract.
A quick note on risk mitigation here, since we're talking about substations and potentially old industrial land like junkyards. What about the environmental risk of contamination?
That is a mandatory injection of prudence, absolutely. If the land was historically used for industrial purposes, a junkyard, a storage facility, which is common next to power infrastructure, we had to flag the necessity of a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, an ESA. For an institutional buyer, contamination is an absolute deal killer. Now, you don't perform the ESA before you have it under contract, but if the initial search reveals obvious red flags like old fuel tanks or industrial runoff, that risk must be factored into your offer price as a massive discount, or you just walk away.
So the best power dirt is clean, former agricultural land adjacent to the substation?
That's the jackpot.
Okay, moving to point 3, the shape and slope, the geometry. This seems trivial, but these buildings have very specific industrial needs.
The rule is structural. Data centers are massive rectangular boxes. They're designed for maximum density and efficiency. They absolutely hate hills, they hate slopes, and they hate any weird, non-standard shapes. Time is profit, and earthwork destroys time.
So visually, on a map, what constitutes a pass versus a fail?
A pass is square or rectangular acreage with flat or maybe minimally sloped terrain. We need efficiency. A fail includes weird triangles, properties that are too narrow and long for a substantial building pad, or those flag lots parcels with a tiny, complicated strip of access leading back to the main land mass. And of course, steep hills or ravines are an immediate fail.
Can you quantify why that geometry matters so much? What does earthwork actually cost a developer?
Earthwork, the process of moving tons of dirt to flatten a hill or fill a ravine, is one of the largest variables in construction costs. It can often run into the millions of dollars and add months to the schedule. Hauling dirt, compacting, retaining walls, it introduces engineering complexity that erodes return on investment dramatically. These developers operate on massive economies of scale. They want plug-and-play dirt. They want to pour a slab and stack steel immediately. The flatter and more rectangular the parcel, the higher the premium they're willing to pay for that simple geometry.
Finally, point 4, the access point. The ingress. This is basic commercial logistics, but it's fundamental.
The rule is straightforward. If a semi-truck cannot access the property, then the $500 million project cannot access the property. It's that simple. During the construction phase and throughout the operational life of a data center, you need constant, easy, heavy truck access for equipment, cooling systems, fuel deliveries, and critically, for delivering and swapping out thousands of new servers.
What's the check here for access? What are we looking for?
The property must touch a paved public road. It needs to have sufficient road frontage to create multiple entry and exit points for large vehicles. We absolutely avoid gravel roads, and we certainly avoid the biggest blind spot of all, landlocked parcels.
Ah, the landlocked parcel trap. It looks perfect. It's right next to the substation, but it's surrounded by neighbor properties with no legal road access.
It's an instant waste of time. Dealing with easement negotiations after you contract the main parcel introduces unacceptable risk and delay that institutional buyers will not tolerate. You must either confirm that public road access already exists, or if you identify a necessary easement across a neighbor's property, that easement must be secured in writing before you present the main contract to an institutional buyer. Public road access is non-negotiable for scale and speed.
So we've executed the 4-point checklist. The land passes the high voltage test. It's clear of wetlands, it's flat and rectangular, and it has public road access. Now we move to the pre-mortem, the mindset and preparation before we call that seller.
We always start by asking, why will this deal fail? And in this specific market, the failure point is almost always seller delusion. The seller thinks their land is instantly worth $1 million an acre because they read a local news headline that Amazon is scouting the county. They anchor their expectation to the fantasy, not the reality.
So we need a structural reality check. And that starts with zoning, which dictates how quickly that land can become shovel-ready.
Check the zoning immediately. Agricultural, or ag zoning, is perfectly fine. It's common for these large tracts. But you need to know that ag requires time and cost for rezoning to industrial or commercial. That can slow the entire transaction by 6 to 12 months. Institutional buyers factor that delay and risk into their price. Commercial or industrial zoning, right next to the substation, that's the jackpot. That is the most valuable shovel-ready dirt, and you can pay a higher premium for that certainty.
And the final anchor for the offer strategy. This is critical for making the maximum profit on the spread.
Do not offer based on future value. The seller is already doing that speculation themselves. You anchor your offer based strictly on the current established market value for raw agricultural or similarly zoned land in that area. You make your money on the spread between that current low ag price and the massive premium the developer is willing to pay for dirt that passes this specific, rare 4-point infrastructure test. The professional investor makes their money on the disciplined acquisition price, not on speculative future appreciation.
We've covered the entire tactical playbook, from the $17.9 billion capital flood to the 4 steps required to secure the dirt that capital needs. The takeaway is crystal clear. This 31% institutional commitment is the definitive blue ocean for 2025 and likely the rest of the decade.
This is the lowest competition, highest reward strategy available right now in real estate acquisition. It really is. It's high reward because the end buyers are the most solvent entities in the world with $100 billion mandates. And it's low competition because the barriers to entry are not money. They are knowledge and the discipline to execute this specific search strategy.
The winning edge is simple and technical. The criteria are non-negotiable. It has to pass that high-voltage test. Whoever uses that 4-point checklist to systematically find power dirt locations is positioned to capture a piece of the largest, most aggressive wealth transfer we've seen in the real estate sector this generation.
And we have the absolute validation. Blackstone didn't just invest. They bet $25 billion on this precise premise in Pennsylvania. They decided power is the new location, and they will build the infrastructure if necessary, but they still need the dirt next to the grid to start.
It changes everything about strategic site selection. We used to look for proximity to highways and ports, focused on physical goods.
Right.
Now we look for proximity to the massive transformers, focused on the flow of electrons.
And that shift leads us to the final provocative thought we need to keep analyzing as this market matures. Given that Northern Virginia is full, and institutional investors are now prioritizing resilience, sustainability, and speed to market, in addition to that initial power connection, the next critical element for successful site acquisition will be the ability to quickly secure local regulatory sign-off and permitting. This means government energy and permitting policy is about to become the next major high-value target for detailed site analysts. The money isn't just following the existing power capacity anymore. It's going to aggressively follow the path of least regulatory resistance. That variable regulatory friction is the next core constraint we have to solve to maintain our lead.
Hey, it's Paul. I'm back. So listen, you don't have to stop flipping houses to do this. You just have to be smart enough to recognize the winning lottery ticket when you see it. Most wholesalers drive past substations and 50-foot electrical industrial towers every day, and they see ugly infrastructure. I want you to drive past and see retirement money. So here's the play. Keep your residential business running. Add this filter to your brain. And if you do find a piece of land near high voltage lines, do not guess. Do not use a standard residential contract. I built a specific data center wholesaling toolkit for this. It has the right commercial LOI, the zoning checklist, and the script to use when you talk to landowners. It's $29. Grab it. Save it to your desktop and be ready to pull the trigger when the opportunity hits. Link is in the show notes. Stay sharp.